Ah, but Dumbledore, my dear Madame Maxime, if you have an alternative, I would be delighted to hear it. Dumbledore waited, but Madame Maxime did not speak. She merely glared. She wasn't the only one either. Snape looked furious, Karkaroff livid. Bagman, however, looked rather excited. Well, shall we crack on then? He said, rubbing his hands together and smiling around the room. Got to give our champions their instructions, haven't we? Barty, want to do the honours? Mr. Crouch seemed to come out of a deep reverie. Yes, he said. Instructions. Yes, the first task. He moved forwards into the firelight. Close to, Harry thought. He looked ill. There were dark shadows beneath his eyes and a thin papery look about his wrinkled skin that had not been there at the Quidditch World Cup. The first task is designed to test your daring, he told Harry, Cedric, Fleur, and Crumb. So, we are not going to be telling you what it is. Courage in the face of the unknown is an important quality in a wizard. Very important. The first task will take place on November the 24th in front of the other students and the panel of judges. The champions are not permitted to ask for or accept help of any kind from the teachers to complete the tasks in the tournament. The champions will face the first challenge armed only with their wands. They will receive information about the second task when the first is over. Owing to the demanding and time-consuming nature of the tournament, the champions are exempted from the end-of-year tests. Mr. Crouch turned to look at Dumbledore. I think that's all, is it, Albus? I think so, said Dumbledore, who was looking at Mr. Crouch with mild concern. Are you sure you wouldn't like to stay at Hogwarts tonight, Barty? No, Dumbledore, I must get back to the Ministry, said Mr. Crouch. It is a very, very difficult time at the moment. I've left young Weatherby in charge, very enthusiastic, a little over-enthusiastic, if truth be told. Well, you'll come and have a drink before you go, at least, said Dumbledore. Come on, Barty, I'm staying, said Bagman brightly. It's all happening at Hogwarts now, you know. Much more exciting here than at the office. I think not, Ludo, said Crouch, with a touch of his old impatience. Professor Karkaroff, Madame Maxime. A nightcap, said Dumbledore, but Madame Maxime had already put her arm around Fleur's shoulder and was leading her swiftly out of the room. Harry could hear them both talking very fast in French as they went off into the great hall. Karkaroff beckoned to Crumb, and they too exited, though in silence. Harry, Cedric, I suggest you go to bed, said Dumbledore, smiling at both of them. I am sure Gryffindor and Hufflepuff are waiting to celebrate with you, and it would be a shame to deprive them of this excellent excuse to make a great deal of mess and noise. Harry glanced at Cedric, and who nodded, and they left together. The great hall was deserted now, and the candles had burnt low, giving the jagged smiles of the pumpkins an eerie flickering quality. So, said Cedric with a slight smile, we're playing against each other again, I suppose, said Harry. He really couldn't think of anything to say. The inside of his head seemed to be so in complete disarray, as though his brain had been ransacked. So tell me, said Cedric, as they reached the entrance hall, which was now lit only with torches in the absence of the goblet of fire. How did you get your name in? I didn't, said Harry, staring at him. I didn't put my name in. I'm telling the truth. Ah, okay, said Cedric. Harry could tell that Cedric didn't believe him. Well, see you then. Instead of going up to the marble staircase, Cedric headed for a door to its right. Harry stood listening to him, going down the stone steps beyond it, then slowly started to climb the marble ones. Was anyone except Ron and Hermione going to believe him, or would they all think that he put himself in the tournament? Yet how could anyone think that, when he was facing competitors who had 3 years more magical education than he had? when he was now facing tasks which not only sounded very dangerous, but which were to be performed in front of hundreds of people. Yes, he'd thought about it, he'd fantasized about it, but it had been a joke, really, an idle sort of dream. He'd never really seriously considered entering. But someone else had considered it. Someone else had wanted him in the tournament, and had made sure that he was entered. Why? To give him a treat? He didn't think so, somehow. To see him make a fool of himself, well, they were likely to get their wish. But to get him killed? Was Moody just being his usual paranoid self? Couldn't someone have put Harry's name in the goblet as a trick? A practical joke? Did anyone really want him dead? Harry was able to answer that at once. Yes, someone wanted him dead. Someone had wanted him dead ever since he'd been a year old. Lord Voldemort. But how could Voldemort have ensured that Harry's name got into the goblet of fire? Voldemort was supposed to be far away, in some distant country, in hiding alone, feeble and powerless. Yet, in that dream he had had, just before he had awoken, with his scarab hurting, Voldemort had not been alone. He had been talking to Wormtail, plotting Harry's murder. Harry got a shock to find himself facing the fat lady already. He had barely noticed where his feet were carrying him. It was also a surprise to see that she was not alone in her frame. The wizened wizard who had flitted into her neighbor's painting when he had joined the champions downstairs, was now sitting smugly beside the fat lady. She must have dashed through every picture lining every 7 staircases to reach here before him. Both she and the fat lady were looking down at him with the keenest interest. "Well, well, well," said the fat lady. "Violet's just told me everything. Who's just been chosen a school champion, then?" "Balderdash," said Harry dully. "It most certainly isn't," said the pale witch indignantly. "No, Vi, it's the password," said the fat lady soothingly, and she swung forward on hinges to let Harry into the common room. The blast of noise that met Harry's ears when the portrait opened almost knocked him backwards. Next thing he knew, he was being wrenched inside the common room by about a dozen pairs of hands, and was facing the whole of Gryffindor House, all of whom were screaming, applauding, and whistling. "You should have told us you'd entered," bellowed Fred. He looked half annoyed, half deeply impressed. "How did you do it without getting a beard?" "Brilliant," roared George. "I didn't," said Harry. "I don't know how." But Angelina had now swooped down upon him. "Oh, if it couldn't be me, at least it's a Gryffindor." "You'll be able to pay back Diggory for that last Quidditch match, Harry," shrieked Katie Bell, another of the Gryffindor chasers. "We've got food, Harry. Come and have some." "I'm not hungry. I had enough at the feast." But nobody wanted to hear that he wasn't hungry. Nobody wanted to hear that he hadn't put his name in the goblet. Not one single person seemed to have noticed that he wasn't at all in the mood to celebrate. Lee Jordan had unearthed a Gryffindor banner from somewhere, and he was insisting on draping it around Harry like a cloak. Harry couldn't get away. Whenever he tried to sidle over to the staircase up to the dormitories, the crowd around him closed ranks, forcing another butterbeer on him, stuffing crisps and peanuts into his hands. Everyone wanted to know how he had done it, how he had tricked Dumbledore's age line and managed to get his name in the goblet. "I didn't," he said, over and over again. "I don't know how it happened." But for all the notice anyone took, he might have just as well have not answered at all. "I'm tired," he bellowed finally, after nearly half an hour. "No, seriously, George, I'm going to bed." He wanted more than anything to find Ron and Hermione, to find a bit of sanity, but neither of them seemed to be in the common room, insisting that he needed to sleep, and almost flattening the little Creevy brothers as they attempted to waylay him at the foot of the